All right, we're now going to turn our attention to a few of the different dimensions of development. Certain things will be repeating, certain things are going to be fresh. So let's begin with talking about physical development. Even before we talk about birth, after conception, physical development is quite outrageous. It's quite outstanding. After conception, we are the size even less than a grain of rice. And from there, we develop over a 9 to 10 month period to be the size of a melon. There is rapid cellular growth, there's rapid neural growth in the brain, billions upon billions of neural pathways are formed, bone structures come into place, everything really starts to come into form, and it's quite a fantastic process that happens in utero. Once a child is born, they begin to grow on a pretty steady basis, 5 to 7 pounds a year and 2 to 3 inches per year. The brain is at 55% of its development and growth by age 2. And by age 6, we're already at 90% of our physical and physiological growth within the brain structures. And also, in terms of motor development, there's a very rapid development that occurs from an infant being able to develop motor tone so that they can hold their eventually they can hold their neck up, they be able to roll over from side to side. Then a child is tested to see if they can eventually push themselves up and then sit up, start to walk around, start to crawl, and then eventually, obviously, walking and running. All of these occur within the first 2 years of life. Physically speaking, adolescents achieve some very significant changes in their bodies, indicating the maturity and the beginning of the sexual gland development, reaching. Also, rapid increases in height occur. At this stage, also, puberty is what is occurring, and we see the signs of puberty through a female's menarche stage, which is the advent of her cycle, of her menstrual cycle, and a male experiences his first ejaculation, which is referred to as spermarche. So these are the physical signs of development in adolescence. In adulthood, physical maturation is complete. We see that as people get older and they mature, their physical state starts to decline. They're not as strong as they were when they were younger. As they get into their older years, there are significant physical changes, maybe to eyesight, to hearing, and these, by the way, eyesight and hearing are declining even earlier in life, really in middle adulthood. But as we enter late adulthood, our bones may become more brittle. You hear people breaking their hips and their knees and different parts of the body more easily. People start to, actually some people even begin to shrink and lose height as they age. Okay, moving forward to some of the cognitive development milestones. At infancy through childhood, there are significant cognitive abilities that are developing and thought processes. We already mentioned in the last section about Jean Piaget's work about cognitive development. A child is able to have more advanced capacity for mathematics, for language, for logic. As we said, language is developing quite naturally, actually, out of birth. Some of that is an inborn skill set. If you are a child that grows up in a bilingual home or a multilingual home, you're not putting effort into learning the language. It just is being developed and absorbed by a certain part of your brain, which is a very different part of the brain that has to learn a language as an adult. Much harder to learn a language as an adult, because as a child, there's an inborn capacity for this. Moving on to other aspects of cognitive development, an adolescent is able to tackle more complex logical questions They're able to think, as we said, abstractly. There is an efficiency with which a child or an adolescent is able to think through their thoughts and problem solve both in school and out of school. An abstract thought becomes significant in adolescence. So I can expect an adolescent to be able to speak with analogies, saying something like, birds of a feather flock together. So that we know two people who are alike maybe get together, or they may understand the saying such as, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Okay? And another important feature of this of adolescence is the ability for empathy. Empathy is the capacity for understanding other people's emotions, being able to feel a pain or a sadness or a care for another person, even if you haven't gone through that feeling yourself or that experience yourself. You can know that people who are suffering, what it might feel like, even if you haven't developed that experience yourself. So this is empathy which is not present in earlier years but does come in adolescent years. In adulthood, obviously, we are living complex lives, ever-changing lives. Circumstances are changing. The ability to manage a lot more complex aspects of life, being able to manage a family and a work life and a social life. All of these are complex aspects of living that come with age. With age also comes an increase in crystallized intelligence. As you get older, you remember more information. Crystallized information such as dates, historical influencers over time, knowing the states of a country, the capital cities, formulas, mathematics, the stock market ticker. So all of this information is crystallized and grows with age. Unfortunately, though, as we get older, there is a decline in cognitive capacity. We may lose the ability for fluid intelligence, the ability to remember how to operate certain types of electronics or devices that we once knew how to use. The ability for other fluid types of information can decline over time, but generally the crystallized information does stay relatively stable unless you are suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's or another cognitive deficit in older years. We now move on to social aspects of development. We turn to the work of John Bowlby, who talked about this notion of there being an attachment between a caregiver and their parent, and that there are different types or levels of attachment that a child experiences with their caregiver. And based on the type of attachment, a child will have different personality styles or traits. So Bowlby talked about there being an avoidant, a resistant, disorganized, and secure attachment styles. So just to speak about some of them, the secure attachment with a child is one where a child knows that the parent they can depend on their parent, they are tightly bonded with their parent. If the parent leaves the room and a 6-month-old is there, the 6-month-old will cry quite a lot because of that secure attachment. Sometimes people think that if a child cries too much when the parent leaves, that's a bad sign. But in reality, the research shows that that's a strong sign of there being a solid bond and sense of attachment with the parent. An avoidant, on the opposite side, attachment is a child who the parent is not really engaging with the child. They are avoiding that attachment. They're avoiding that bond. And that can lead to significant difficulties for that child as they get older. A disorganized attachment is one where it's not really dependable. Maybe there's inconsistencies with the type of attachment that the child experiences with the parent, and that has its own set of implications. Moving forward, let's talk about some parenting styles that a parent might bring to their upbringing of their children. There are 4 different types of styles that we'll talk about. The authoritarian style is a parent who is quite strict with their child, where it's my way or the highway. The rules are very rigid. An authoritarian parent does not want to be challenged, and if they are challenged, they come down very strong and very strict and very with quite a lot of punishment for their children. A variation of this is the authoritative parent. The authoritative parent also has strict rules. They also have a desire for the child to follow the regimens that are set up by the parents. However, they are more flexible and more forgiving when the child doesn't follow exactly what the parent wants. They may be more patient with exploring with the child why they're not following the rules that are set up in the home. They may be more open to hearing what the child has to say about their preference. And so it's a bit more of a collaborative process. Research has shown that it is the authoritative approach which yields the strongest bond and more broadly speaking, the healthiest and most well-adjusted child. The permissive parent is the one who basically just is laissez-faire, as they say, very open, very easygoing. They're not really putting up much of a struggle, nor are they setting a tremendous amount of rules. So a child may ask, can I go out? Sure. Can I sleep by my friend? Okay. Very much whatever the child would like. There are some benefits and some drawbacks to this approach. Finally, the uninvolved parent is, as it sounds, the parent that is really not getting involved at all. So anytime a child comes up to them and says, hey, mom, dad, can I do this or that? And the parent says, whatever. I don't know. Do what you want. I don't really care. That's the uninvolved parent, and obviously results in a child having quite a loose amount of boundaries and rules and has a lot of implications. Moving on, in adolescence, we've already talked about the value of forming an identity through Erik Erikson's work. This is when children begin to pull away from their parents. They are starting to go out with their friends without their parents having to take them around. Eventually, they start driving and gaining that sense of independence. Peer relationships are crucial during this age. It is no longer the parents that are setting the tone, but rather a child's peer group that is setting the tone of ways of behaving and setting up what's expected by society. I'll also add here that social media has quite an important role in setting up the social expectations of adolescents. And this is becoming more and more of a factor with cyberbullying and becoming very influential these days. So it's not just face-to-face peer time, but it's also digital peers and the digital media in general that are setting the tones. We're moving on now to adulthood. Through adulthood, obviously life becomes more complex. There's a greater need to have and to find meaning in one's life. What is my purpose? As Erikson again spoke about in his theory, having a sense of generativity. How do I generate an influence in this world? What legacy will I leave behind? Very often people define themselves by their career. When you meet somebody, after they ask you your name, they want to know, what do you do for a living? And that's how people begin to categorize you and get a sense of who you are, because there is quite a fusing between who you are and what you do. Although, of course, we encourage people to have hobbies beyond just what they do for work, because that also creates depth of character in who you are. Family relationships are also crucial, and they play a central role in who we are. Our children, our spouses, our immediate circle of family. So as you go out and get further and further out of the central point, you have less of an influence on a person but each role, each layer does have its impact on the individual. Finally, let's turn our attention to the development of morals and values. And this has been done by the work of Kohlberg. Kohlberg discusses four stages of moral development. He says that as an infant, we really only know right and wrong by what feels good and feels bad. It's not really something that we have an ability to learn, but it's really, I feel like grabbing this from my brother. I feel like taking this water and spilling it on the table. That's just what I feel like doing. It's not because I think it's the right or wrong thing. I just act the way I feel, and there's no real filter that an infant has. However, as they enter into the second stage, the toddler phase, the sense of right and wrong are being developed through what they're told by others. So if you think about it, a toddler, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, is starting to enter into preschool and kindergarten, and they're being told by their teachers. They're told by their parents, don't do that, don't hit your friend, don't take their toy, make sure to share. All of these messages start to come out and begin to develop a child's sense of morality. What is right? What is wrong? Well, it must be what other people tell me. As they get older and they enter into later years, they begin to internalize the family's values and the family's consequences of behavior. So I know what's right in my home, in my family. And then as I get to the school age, 7 years old, first grade, second grade, third grade, in those early years of school, I begin to get a sense of what I should or shouldn't do, again, based on what other people are telling me. But it's more than just what they tell me. There is an inner sense of what is the right thing to do. There is a sense of, I think I know what's right and wrong. I know that I shouldn't be taking my friend's belongings. I know that I shouldn't be hitting other people or pushing other people or stealing from other people. There is a greater sense of what should and shouldn't happen. And finally, Kohlberg spoke about the development of abstract right and wrong. This sense that the larger society begins to teach us abstractly, knowing from a moral code, is it right for me to steal a loaf of bread if I am starving? Is that right or wrong? Well, there may be a debate about that. What if I have his famous story of a pharmacist who develops a drug that can save people's lives, but he wants to charge $10 million for that drug. So what would happen if a man's wife is dying and that drug is the only one thing that can save her life and he doesn't have the money? Is stealing it wrong if he's not being given the opportunity to buy it? Well, that's not a black and white answer. And that's where this sense of abstract right and wrong begins to come into play. And it is through the preteen and teen years that we begin to develop that capacity. So that about wraps up the various aspects of development in this section. There was a lot that we covered, so I encourage you to go back and go through it slowly, both with your written materials as well as through this video material, and make sure that you grasp the differences in what we've talked about in this and in the previous sections of development. You're doing great so far. Can't wait to see you at the next module.